I think the term male gaze should probably be replaced in today's language with sexualizing gaze. It's really like that's the essence of it is the that no one wants their baby. And when we're talking about an 8-year-old in puberty, that's a baby, right? And no one wants their baby sexualized. And no one wants their baby to derive their self-esteem from being sexualized. So that's where that reaction comes from. That mama bear reaction comes from a very rational place. I want you to define your self-worth based upon who you are as a human, based upon how bright you are, how interesting you are, how funny you are, what a good friend you are. I do not want you to derive your self-esteem from the gaze of strangers who are looking at you on your shifting body and giving you that look, that knowing look of sexualizing. And right, we live in a culture where especially young females are highly, highly sexualized. So the question is a great one. I'm a humongous fan of explaining the why. If you are in constant conversation with your kid, and there's no more one talk, this is many, many talks over many, many years. If you are in constant conversation with your kid about all of this stuff, then you have the freedom and the ability to throw into some, if not many, of the conversations why you feel this way. I don't want people to look at you as a sexual object as your body is changing, because I want you to define yourself based on all these different parameters. And by the way, I will hold myself up as an example of someone who did it wrong, because when my daughter was growing up, I used to make the grandparents, everyone never use the term pretty. I was so sure that was the fix. Like, let's get all the physical praise out of there. And you know what? When she turned 18, she turned to me and said, I never felt pretty because no one in our family ever used that word. And I was behind the scenes saying, don't use it, don't use it, don't use it. I want her to be valued for all these other things. So taking it entirely off the list is not the solution either, and it's not realistic, and it has its own repercussions. But explaining the why. Why don't you want the world to value your kid just for that helps them understand. Then they can make the decision when they're over at their friend's house and everyone's just wearing a bra to a party. Then they can make the decision, maybe I want to wear a shirt.
But we can't control what other people do in the world, right? And when you have a kid who's 11 and looks 16, and so appears to the world one way, when developmentally they're really at a much younger stage, they need the language and the framing for making sense of what the hell is happening when they walk down the street and people say stuff to them or they look at them. And this is where open conversation is really important. And it sounds something like, hey, kiddo, we talk all the time about how your body's changing. And that might also mean that people in the world might notice also and make comments to you. I want to talk about some things you can do or say when you're in a situation that feels uncomfortable so that you are ready for it. Yeah. And by the way, they have no right to be saying any of this to you, but unfortunately, we can't always control what other people do.
Yeah.
And that's a hard conversation. Again, that gets back to the grief. Like, God, do I wish that teenage girls could walk down the street and not have people make comments about their bodies or tell them to smile?
Yeah,
of course I do.
The world we live in.
Yeah, I can't change it, but I can prepare her for a safe and like self-protective response to what people might say to her. And that's where we get into it. And like, clothing choices and all of that, those are nuances on the same conversation. The place it gets tricky is relatives, because relatives think that they have permission to make comments about a kid's body and to hug and kiss or expect hugs and kisses, when really it's like, no, it's not your right. So one of the things, grandparents and aunts and uncles should keep their mouths shut about a kid's body in puberty. Nothing about weight or breasts or acne or any of that stuff. They need to zip it. So if you're caring for a kid that age and you have people in your family who are making comments, you have the right to tell them, I would say, shut the hell up. Cara would say, to respectfully ask them to refrain from making those comments. But the second thing is, kids have a say-so about who touches them. And even if that someone is a close relative, they need to ask permission for hugs and kisses, because what it does is models for kids that anyone who touches them needs their permission before they touch them. And then they go out into the world and they're like, no, you got to ask my permission. I don't just freely give it and you don't freely take it. I get to determine who touches me.
So important. So important. Such a small thing, but such an easy thing to put into practice.
That's right.
Start, and then it becomes habit, basically.